back to the bottom of Amud Bet in Yud Chet and go back to the Gemara. So what did we see yesterday? Let's summarize a little bit. We said that when a person says a neder in a way that cannot be interpreted possibly. So it's definitely, it can be either one thing or another thing. So one way to interpret it would be actually that it's a valid form of neder, right? The other way, obviously, is that it's not going to be a valid form of neder. So what do we assume? We actually assume the more machmir approach, and that means that would be it would be binding, the binding lashon of the neder. Okay, so now we had started reading yesterday, but I want to go back to it. V'hatnan. So we learned in another Mishnah, and that other Mishnah is in Tohorot. So Safek Nezirut Lehakel. So that seems to go against what it is that this Mishnah that we just saw yesterday is saying, right? So why is it that we assume that by Yostam Nedarim, that we're not going to whatever it is that when we're not sure whatever it is that he said, that we're going to say that we have to be machmir about it. So we're going to see what the Gemara has to say here. And we have we're going to have this machloket again in between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan. And okay, so let's see. Amar Rabbi Zera lo kashya. So what he means to say is that there's actually, it's not a question of difficulty. It's a question, there's a machloket here in between Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan. Both of the Rabbi Eliezer is is Mekel. That's what we said before. And the Rabbanan actually are Machmirim. And the Rabbanan are the ones who are the author of our Mishnah that we just read. So let's see, if the Gemara actually agrees with all of this, which it actually is not going. So, Rabbi Eliezer. So the Mishnah that we were talking about, when we were referring to the Nezirut, we're following Rabbi Eliezer, Ha-Rabbanan. And the Mishnah that we just read actually follows the Rabbanan. Detanya, Amagdish Chayato Uvehemato. So you have this whole situation where you have this guy who's actually going to Magdish. He's wild animals, or he's going to Magdish. He's domestic animals, right? Hegdish et koi. So, and also in the shuffle, he also Magdish he's koi. And the koi is what? It's this animal that we really don't know whether he's one or the other, right? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, lo higdish et hakol. So there's this whole thing about this, right? The koi is a safek chaya. We don't know, or safek behema. We don't know what it is. It can be either one of the two. So because it's a safek, we're going to say that actually it's kadosh, right? So that's what the Rabbanan say. Rabbanan said yes, because we mean to include the safek in whatever it is that is kadosh. So if you apply the same rule to nedarim, when it comes to a neder, when this person, if you say that a koi is based on the safek, we decide that he's kadosh, then on the neder, if someone is if you have a safek that he actually said this or he said that, we're going to say, yes, it actually is valid. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer, what he's going to say, he says, these are all interpretations that I'm talking about. If there's a question of money, this guy is actually not going to commit to a position of safek, right? And so if you apply the same thing, then the koi is not going to be kadosh. So, but when you're actually committing to himself, then he's it's not the same thing. So he's not going to be applying the safek to him. So that's why we said that Rabbi Eliezer holds that safek nezirut is lehakel. So this case that we just saw, where you had this guy who magdish the wild animals and the domestic animals, what is this case? So there's actually three interpretations that we can derive from this. The Ran says that he's Magdish, he's Chayot, or he's Be'emot, not both of them at the same time, right? Rabbanan said that the koi is kadosh misafek. That's what we said before, right? And so it could be that it's either chaya or behema, because we said that he magdish. This guy is going to magdish everything, right? So if it's not kadosh misafek, it's because he magdish just the chaya. Maybe the koi is a behema, and the behema is actually not kadosh. So it's either or. So the Rabbanan say the koi is kadosh, and Rabbi Eliezer says the koi is not kadosh. Okay, so you have like all kinds of interpretations that keep on going. You have Tosafot that says that like someone who magdishes both the chayot and the behemot means that the koi should be either one or the other, so it falls into it, right? So that means that it's kadosh. And so he said that in that case, Rabbi Eliezer would have to say that it's kadosh, even if it's safek on one side or on the other, it wouldn't matter. All right, I'm going to skip the rest because there's like a whole bunch of like other explanations that we can see. But let's keep on moving. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer Omer lo hikdish et hakoy. Okay, man de amar mamono me'ayil lesveka. So someone who says that actually you have like a doubt as to whether he's like, his money is like is prohibited, right? Gufe nami me'ayel. So he said that this actually applies to the same thing when it comes to himself in terms of like Nazirut, for example. Uman de amar mamono lo me'ayel lesfeka. And so the one who actually says that you're not going to subject your whatever money it is that you owe that you own in like cases where there is a safek, then that would be Rabbi Eliezer Gufe. He says that this person, kol sheken delo mehayel lesfeka, it actually would not be imposing on himself any kind, he wouldn't machnis any kind of like, safek into himself. So what does Rabbi Zera, that was what Rabbi Zera had challenged, right? So now we have Abaye who enters the game. Amar le Abaye, במאי okimta lesafek nezirut lehakel. So how is it that you actually are interpreting this whole thing about the Mishnah when we say that nezirut safek lehakel, right? Because that would be actually against what our own Mishnah is saying. Rabbi Eliezer. So we have to say that this following the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Emai safek, but that what about like the last part of the Mishnah that actually is referring to like the behemot, safek bechorot. We're referring here to a doubt that concerns bechorot. So because we know that it's like if it is whether it affects like a person who's a bechor, then you would have to have a pidyon haben. If it affects if it's an animal, then that animal should be makdish. So and it should be given to the Kohen. So ema safek, safek bechorot, echad bechore adam. This is a safek that you have like on a bechor who is a person. Ve'echad bechore behema ben tmea ben tehora. So you don't know. It doesn't matter whether the animal is actually a kosher animal or not a kosher animal. Umotzi mechaveru alav. And so it would be like the burden of proof would actually be on the Kohen to show that this, like, that this Bechor is actually a Bechor. So the Kohen is never going to be able to be sure, and so he's not going to be able to have any kind of claim on it, right? But what about this animal? Even if we're not 100% sure, because there is a doubt, this animal has to be actually treated as if he was kadosh. And so you're not allowed to make it work, and you're not allowed to shear his wool. Okay, ala aharai vetane ala. So there's a baraita, like, that teaches us ve'asurim bigize ve'avoda. So that's what I just said. It's like, we're not allowed to actually shear its wool, and we're not allowed to use them for work. So that's like, you have to be, so what is this teaching us? It's teaching us that we have to be machmir on that safek. And so that kind of like goes against what it is that Rabbi Eliezer was saying. Amarle, so Rabbi Zera is like, continuing to talk to Abaye. Emaika medmit kedusha aba'a me'elea. So how is it that actually you're going to compare like this, the fact that this animal could potentially be kadosh, lekdushat aba'a bide adam, like, that has like to the one that you would that would have to be the one for the Nazir, right? Because it's a sort of like kedusha. Because what we said is like Rabbi Eliezer does not impose like any kind of prohibition when there is a doubt. So he's like, he goes lekula. So let's see what he has to say. Ela ikashya hakashya. So this is like a difficulty right here with like the way that Rabbi Zera is actually talking. And what is it that is difficult? So, when we were talking about like, the animals, another thing is like, how is it that that the animal is actually the bechor? Let's assume the animal actually, that there's an animal that had twin animals at the same time, right? And you weren't really paying attention which one came first. If it was like there was one that was female, there was one that was male. If you didn't pay attention, then you have no idea. Is there a bechor in there or is there not a bechor in there? Because we know that it has to be like a male animal. So this is like, this is one of these situations where you wouldn't really know. And it's actually the same thing in human beings. If you have someone who has like a pregnancy that gets terminated very early, if they have another pregnancy and it's a boy, then you still have a pidyon haben, as long as it was something that was very, very early. If it's something that was not very early, that was very late, then there's nothing to talk about. But if it's something that it's in between, like, in the middle, I don't know what would be considered in the middle, I guess like, fourth month or whatever it is, and they lost like the baby, then there's actually a doubt as to whether you do a pidyon haben. There's people who say that you do a pidyon haben actually without saying a bracha. I had never heard of that before, but I thought that it was very interesting, that it's something that like, you actually would potentially do. Hi, Hanan. We're on Yud Tet Amud Aleph, about 6 lines from the top. So anyway, so that's like, that would be the comparison. And so the Safek Nazirut, we know that Safek Nazirut lihakel, and someone is like not going to get himself into a Safek just like that, right? And it's like the same thing of like for the behema, we like not going to like, decide just stam that it's a bechor, it's not a bechor. Ela ikashya hakashya. So we have this difficulty. Safek mashkin litma. So we have like in terms of like liquids being tameh, we have like different opinions as to whether a liquid actually, in which case a liquid is tameh and what it is that can happen to it, right? Tameh, they're deemed like, we say that they can be tameh out of safek. Le tameh acherim, or so liquids can become tameh deoraita. That's one opinion. And then if they're tameh deoraita, then they can transmit actually the tum'ah to something else also that would touch it. Okay. Another way would be that it actually can become tameh, but it cannot transmit it to anything else. So the mashkim would be like tameh, but if it touched food, for example, the food would be okay. So that's the second one. Letame acherim, right? So it's like, the first case was like where it would be, it potentially could be make other things tameh, tahor. And then, but there's another situation where like, the way to look at it is that it would actually be tahor. Divrei Rabbi Meir. This is the way that Rabbi Meir is actually seeing this. So as far as he's concerned, he said that they can be tameh, but they cannot metame something else. That's the way that Rabbi Meir says that. וכן היה רבי אליעזר אומר כדבריו. So what is it that, so we say that Rabbi Eliezer actually follows Rabbi Meir's shita, ומי סבירה לרבי אליעזר לטמא tameh. So then the way that he actually looks at it is like, if the mashkin are actually tameh, so are they actually, are other liquids like, that touch it would become tameh as well. Ve'hatanya, so we have another baraita, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, en tum'a lemashkin kol ikar. So tuma, as far as he's concerned, it's not like, it doesn't apply to all the liquids. I think that we see that like it applies to like 7 kinds of liquids. It's like blood, water, oil. I don't remember the 7.
Wine.
Wine,
yeah.
I forget what the others are.
Right.
I mean, whatever, right, whatever it is, it's like, I used to know them, but I don't anymore. So those specific ones, as far as he's concerned, it applies to specific ones. Teda, so Shehare Ha'ir Yom Ben Yohezer Ish Tzereda. So you have this guy one day, his name is Yossi Ben Yoetzer, or that he was from Tzereda. And he actually came to like testify al ayal kematza, about like this animal that like actually was like a grasshopper, or it looked like a grasshopper, dachan. And he said that this animal was actually kasher. So we actually know that certain types of grasshoppers were kosher, at least way back when. Huh?
Are kosher today.
Are kosher. Really? You know of anyone that actually eats grasshoppers nowadays?
I have eaten a grasshopper.
Yes, I do.
Rabbi Slifkin distributes them.
I do.
Okay. Wow. All right.
I didn't like it, but I have.
Not on my list. Not on my list, but okay. All right. The al-mashkin bet midbachaya, and then he was talking about certain liquids, like that came out in the Bet Hamikdash, dachan, and he said that those specific liquids that were over there, they were actually they were not, they could not become tameh whatsoever. Okay, so, and it's like, that liquid actually that we're referring to in the Bet Hamikdash is actually the blood when they were butchered, when they were like doing shchita of the animals, and all the water that they actually use to wash it out. So so this guy is saying that if it was in the Bet Hamikdash, actually it could not, it was actually tahor. Okay, dachan. So they could not become tameh. So that's kind of something weird to say, because we know deoraita that we have this list of all liquids that can become tameh, and we know for a fact that blood and water are part of that list. These are the 2 that we did not forget for sure. So why is it that we're actually making like an exception? That's kind of like really weird. So this guy is this Yossi Ben Yoetzer. He says that as far as he's concerned, that these liquids cannot become, are not possibly becoming tameh deoraita. They can only becoming like tameh derabanan. That's the way that it actually works. And that was like that was something that was lehakel only in the Bet Hamikdash. Okay, so so that's kind of like is a parallel to show that, like to try and see what it is that we're still going back to Rabbi Eliezer that says that nezirut safek lehakel. Okay.
A question. In other Gemara, in other Masechtot, something that is tameh itself but can't cause something else to be tame is often referred to as pasul rather than tame in order to maintain this distinction. But that language isn't being used here.
No, not at all. I mean, I wouldn't be able to answer for that. I can tell you that it's not being used. Why it is not being used, I do not know.
Yeah, it's
I think that maybe it is because this is referring specifically to the Bet HaMikdash. It's not referring to anything else. So maybe it is that for the Bet HaMikdash, we would only use the terms of Tameh and Tahor, and that's something that is outside of the Bet HaMikdash, you would refer to it as Pasul. That's my guess, but that's only a guess.
yeah, but it does sometimes apply in the Beit Mikdash because there are Kachim can be tame as a Revi'i, but there are things that are Shanis that cannot cause something to be a Shlishi. And I don't remember all the details of the categories of these, but I
But you
remember
remember that they use the term of Pasul for that?
I do remember the use of the term the pasul, and that most things that are a Shani cannot cause something to be a Shlishi.
Right.
But food is obviously an exception because it can become a shlishi or a revi. It's well, actually depending on what it is, because the colon could only be a shani, truma can be a shlishi, and
Only truma can be shlishi, I think.
well, kachim can be even be a revi.
Oh, right, up to review, but it has
Yeah,
to be.
We don't see kachim anymore.
Right. It has to
Well,
be.
yeah, at that point it lost it. Okay, let's continue. Aniach li Shmuel. So as far as Shmuel is concerned, there's no issue here. De Amar. So when he refers to the whatever it is that Yossi ben Yoetzer said, Dechan miltame acherim. So you talking about like those liquids that were those mashkim that were in that in the place where they were doing the shchita in the Bet HaMikdash, that they were tahor, meaning that they were actually not metame other liquids. And it was like, but they could actually become tameh themselves. Aval tum'at atzman yesh bahen. So that's what he was saying. It's like they can actually become tameh themselves, but they cannot actually contaminate anything else. Shapir. So what is it? So that would actually follow what Rabbi Eliezer is saying in the second baraita. Elav lerav, and it's like, it goes together with the first one. So what does Rav say? De amar dachan mamash mai ika lemeimar. So he said, like, these like liquids that were in like the place where they were doing shchita, they were tahor, they could not even become tameh whatsoever. So there's three opinions here. You have the first opinion that says that you have a liquid that is tameh, and that liquid can metame something else. You have the second opinion that says that the liquid is tameh, but it cannot contaminate anything else. It's like stays tameh by itself. And you have the third opinion that says those liquids could never become tameh, they're tahor, and that's it. So there's like, all of these are different opinions. So why is it that we have all of these, different differences here? Okay. So this is like, and this is all going back to the Mishnah that was in Tehorot that was talking about the fact that we had like the Nazirut that would be treated lehakel. Okay. So so then we're going back to the fact that, like, what did we talk about originally? We said that when we talk about Nedarim, right, and there's a safek, we go leachmir. We are actually stringent when it comes to, like, you do not know exactly how it is that it was expressed. And so we compared this to the Mishnah that was in Tehorot that actually says that Rabbi Eliezer is like holds that when we talk about Nazirut, we go lehakel. Ela. So let's look at it in a different way. Rabbi Yehuda. So it's not like, we've been talking all this time, we've been trying to see if we could stick it on Rabbi Eliezer, that it was his shita, but apparently it's not. If we look at it, this Mishnah that we talk about Nazirut, then it seems like we can attribute it to Rabbi Yehuda. Veha Rabbi Shimon, right? We had like, we're following Rabbi Shimon, Detanya. והריני נזיר אם יש בברי הזה 100 קור. So you have a case where you have this guy who actually comes in and he says, I am going to be a Nazir if there's like 100 core in this barrel, okay? And it's like it's impossible to actually count, like, first of all, in the pile, whether there's 100 like cores of grain, or it's possible that actually it's been stolen or it disappeared. So you can't count it. You have no idea. So there's a safek here. He actually said, I'm going to be a Nazir if like we can count like all of this all of this grains in this pile. והלך ומצאו שנגנב או שאבד. So that's what I say. He went, he found out that like the pile of grain disappeared or it had been stolen. And so if it disappeared, nobody can measure it anymore. You can't tell if there was 100 cores of grain or not. Rabbi Yehuda matir ורבי שמעון אוסר. So as far as Rabbi Yehuda, he says, well, we have no idea what's going on here. We actually cannot count the grain. So you are not a Nazir. But Rabbi Shimon says, well, you know what? You already expressed that what you wanted is like you wanted to be a Nazir. And it doesn't matter whether there's 100 grains in there or not. We're going to assume that there was 100 cores of like, of this grain in there. And as far as we're concerned, you're a Nazir. Okay. So this is like, so this is Rabbi Yehuda's position. So now it means that like, as far as he's concerned, if there's a safek, then you have to be machmir, right? Okay. Ve'rameh de Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda. So now it's like, very often actually I find that Rabbi Yehuda is in contradiction with himself. He says one thing and then he says another, and then you have to compare them one with the other. So this is what's happening here. Mi amar Rabbi Yehuda lo me'ayel inish nafshe lisfeka. So is it really true that Rabbi Yehuda said that actually when there's like a safek, that it's something that you cannot pin onto a person, right? Urminehi, and it's like there's another place where it says Rabbi Yehuda Omer stam truma. When we have like a reference, like when you have truma, you're not really sure whether it's like you separated, but you don't really know whether it was or it was not, and it's like you have someone who says this object that's in front of me is hereby to me like truma, right? But he doesn't say actually whether it's trumat alishka or trumat. We saw it yesterday. I don't remember what the word was. Gesher, geshen, something like that, right? So it's like two different kinds of trumot, and he did not actually specify which one it was. Behuda Asura, we saw that if he lived like, in Yehuda, then it was Asur, Begalil Muteret, and it was like, if he lived in the Galil, it was allowed to him. Why? She'enam she'agalil makirim et Trumat Alishka, because people who lived up in the Galil, they have no idea what Trumat Alishka is, because Trumat Alishka is something that only exists in the Bet HaMikdash, which is in the in Yehuda, not in the Galil. Okay. Tam'a de'en makirin. So the reason why this neder is actually not valid is why? Because they do not know what happens like actually in the Bet HaMikdash, and so they can't refer to something specifically if they don't know what this thing is.
They never learned that to Shekalim.
Oh yeah. The other one was about the shkalim, right? But it has a specific name. I just don't remember what the name is.
Yeah.
100%. It was about the shkalim. It's going to drive me crazy. So maybe I should look it up. No, Still not. Okay, I'm not going to go crazy over it yet. Okay, Amakirin. So if actually they were familiar with what the Trumat Alishka is, so we're referring to people who are living nearby the temple, Asurin. Then if they said that this object is to me like Truma, then it is definitely asur to them. It is a valid way of saying like a neder. So why is it that's like, is this a proof that when you actually impose some kind of like neder on yourself, that even if there's a safek, that it actually works, right? Because that was like the example in terms of the truma, that it's like you have like if it applies to one thing or if it applies to the other. And we said in one case it was actually asur, in the other case it was mutar. So Rabbi Yehuda is going to look at it a different way. This is a case where I say, I am a Nazir if there are 100 cores of grain in this pile, right? This is like the explanation that we said. It's like it's a doubtful explanation. Another way of looking at it would be to say like, I am going to be a Nazir if this guy that is coming down the road is a Nazir himself. But it so happens that if I see that he's a Nazir himself, but halfway, like the guy who's walking actually turns around, and then you can't tell whether he's a Nazir or not. So is the declaration that you made valid enough for you to actually become a Nazir? So Amar Rava, so what he's saying is that actually it applies. What Rabbi Yehuda is saying is even if you're in situation of safek, it actually applies. So you have said enough that we feel that you committed to actually doing this thing that you said you were going to do. Gabekri kasavar. So, but when we're talking about like the baraita that actually dealt with the pile of grain, right? So he said that like, Rabbi Yehuda says that it's like, this is the kind of situation where it actually should not apply. Kol shesfeko chamur mivadai. So you say that like, you have like a prohibition where you have like something that is like there's a safek, but it's safek that we're sure about it, right? So this is like something that is more stringent. Lo me'ayal nafshe lesfeka. So this person, you actually do not subject it to like whatever it is that to desirut, let's say, because there is a safek here. So this is exactly what it is. Nezirut falls into this category. The ilu gabe nazir vadai migaleach umevi korban ne'echal. So you have like a nazir, right? And he served his 30 days of like nazirut, and now he's up to the point where actually he's finished his term. So what does he have to do? He has to bring like the three korbanot, and he has to like he has to and then he has to like shave his hair or whatever, or right, then that's what he has to do. So if you know for a fact that he's like he's a nazir and his nazirut is over and he has done what he was supposed to do, al sfeko lo matza megaleach. So that's the difference in between someone who you're sure is a nazir is like, and someone who there's like there's like a doubt as to whether he really should have done his term of nazirut or not, is that the one who's you're absolutely certain was a nazir has to bring the korban, has to be like actually shave. The other guy, he doesn't really need to do it because he's like you're not even if he was only a safek nazir, then there is like then he doesn't need to bring a korban. It wouldn't even be valid if he did bring a korban.
Can't bring a chatat,
right?
And he can't shave.
That's what I'm saying. I said if he is, it's like he's not allowed to bring it altogether. Right.
He's bringing ola as a suffix, but
right. But that's like but that's about the size of it. Amar le Rav Huna bar Yehuda le Rava. So the son of so Rav Huna, who's the son of Yehuda, he said to Rava, Amar hareni nazir olam. So he said one day, I am going to be a Nazir for the rest of my life. I don't know what that brings to him. But he puts in a condition to that, if there are 100 cores of grain in this pile, right? And then this is a situation, of course, where this pile of grain disappears or it's stolen or it's like so nobody can really count it. So there's a safek in there. So what is the halacha in this case? Right, like I mean, becoming a permanent Nazir is like, it's not just a stam. It's not the 30 days. It's like forever. So is there a difference here? The fact that he said that he's going to be a Nazir forever and that he's going to be like not. So no, as far as we're concerned, if there's like, if there is a safek, there is a safek. So it's not any more severe in one case than it is in the other. So we still don't understand why it is that Rabbi Yehuda is like, is actually says Safet Lehakel when it comes to like a Nazir that wants to be Leolam, right? Okay, so Amar Le, so Rava is the one who's going to actually answer, right? Nazir Olam Nami. So in this case, where we're talking about a Nazir that is going to stay that wants to be a Nazir for the rest of his life, Sfeko Chamur Mivadai. So the fact that he's like actually expressed something that is so severe, then that means that is like, this prohibition is going to be much more chamir than one that says like, I'm just going to be a Nazir for like 30 days. The ilu vadai, because like the fact that he wants to make it permanent, it's serious, right? בתער ומביא 3 בהמות. So, and interestingly enough, if he actually like, one of the things that the Nazir can't do is cut his hair, but it's like, if you don't cut your hair for the rest of your life, it can grow like fairly heavy, right? So here we say that he actually can trim it. And when he does that, he does bring like 3 animals, like as korbanot. And this is like, but this is something that only applies to a permanent Nazir, the ilu sfeko lo. And so someone who would be only like a Safek Nazir, he would not be allowed to do that. Okay, so we're continuing with this. Amar hareni Nazir Shimshon. So then someone like you have someone who says, I am going to be a Nazir, a Samsonite Nazir. Okay. And again, in the same like situation, if there's 100 cores of grain in this pile, right? Okay, so the difference, right? So the difference, like in terms of like a Samsonite Nazir, is that he is allowed to be metame met. That's the difference. But he cannot cut his hair and he cannot drink wine or anything that has to do with wine. So same thing like, in this situation, he says, I will be that if I actually am, there are 100 like grains, cores of grain like in this pile, and the pile is like stolen, so you can't measure it. So what happens? So we say that a Nazir is like a Shimshoni Nazir. He's not allowed to cut his hair under any circumstance whatsoever. So is there, and we know that there was a safek here. So how is it that actually we can compare like Rabbi Yehuda's leniency, that we say does not actually apply to this case, because this case is like a more serious case. Amarle, Nezir Shimshon Lotanya. So it's like Rava is telling him that the case of like the Shimshon Nazir, it doesn't appear in the Baraita that we talked about. And so with like, we can't actually apply the same ruling to it. And in this case, so Rabbi Yehuda is not going to be lenient with him. Amarle, ve'amar Rav Ada bar Ahava, Tanya. There's another Baraita, Nazir Shimshon, and it says like about, we're talking about the Nazir Shimshon, and it says here, that because in this baraita, that Rabbi Yehuda said that it was okay to actually, be lenient with this, with the Shimshon Nazir, because that was the same situation where there was also the same like declaration, I will be a Nazir Shimshon if there are 100 cores of grain in this pile, and he decided, because it specifically said Nazir Shimshon, that there was a safek in there and it was not a valid case. So why is it that in the one case he said that in the first baraita it's not mentioned, and so you have to be stringent, and in the second baraita it's mentioned, so it's okay, then let it go. Amarle, Tanya Tanya. This is we learned it in the baraita, so it has to be this is the way that it is. And then we're going to we don't understand what it is that Rabbi Yehuda was trying to say, and we're going to let it go because it was taught. Rav Ashi Amar, Ahi Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfon Hi. So actually, Rav Ashi comes and he says, I know where this baraita is. It's like this is something that Rabbi Yehuda is talking about, that he learned from Rabbi Tarfon. And this is a different way of actually looking at it. Detanya, so we learn in this baraita that this guy is saying, I will be a Nazir if this person who's coming over is his name is Reuven. If Reuven is the guy that I see coming over from down the road is Reuven, and this guy said, I am going to be his friend who's with him says, I will be a Nazir if this guy is not Reuven, if he's Shimon. Okay, so either one of the two is going to be wrong. It's obvious. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Tarfon Omer En Echad Mehem Nazir. As far as he's concerned, neither of them are going to be a Nazir. Why? Lefi shelo netna nezirut ela lehafla'a. Because it's they had, neither of them said something that was actually that was clear. Each of them said something that was that was meaningless. And so we're not going to say, oh, this one said it had to be Shimon, this one said it had to be Reuven. We know that either one of them is going to be wrong. So this is thrown out, and neither of them is going to be a Nazir. I my iriya she nigav o she'avad. So when we're talking about the case where the grain was stolen, or it was disappeared, or it was lost, so the fact that you couldn't find it, then it couldn't measured. So Rabbi Tarfon here says that even if they had found a pile of grain, and that pile of grain had the correct amount, then as far as he's concerned, this vow of Nazirut would not be valid whatsoever. Okay, so why is it that he would say that? Ela lehodiacha kocho de Rabbi Shimon. So you have to add what it is that Rabbi Shimon is saying in this case. De af al gav din gav o she'avad. Rabbi Shimon says, in the case where the grain was stolen, or actually it was lost, then it would never be effective. No, I'm sorry. He said the opposite. He said that the vow of Nezirut would be effective. Kesavar me'ayel igish nafshe le'ivsek. Because we said that when we have a doubt, then we actually have to apply the prohibition to this person. So Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda said that actually they are not mekil when it comes to a safek, they actually machmirim. Rabbi Yehuda Omer stam truma bihuda. So when we were in the Mishnah, we were talking about if someone said this is herabai to me like truma, and they didn't say whether it was the Trumat Alishka or the other Truma, right? So Rabbi Yehuda said that it depended whether the Neder had been made in Yehuda or in Galil. So because like in Galil, nobody knew what Trumat Alishka was, and he said that over there it was then it didn't make any sense and it didn't apply. But if it had been done in near Yerushalayim, then it would apply. Ha Makirin, here they would be in Yehuda, they're familiar with what Trumat Alishka is. Asurin. And so whatever it is that they say, this object is like Truma to me, then that object is going to be asur to them. And the neder would be totally like applicable. Alma sfeka lechumra. So we see that like depending on like the place and depending on the nature of the neder, then it actually we can become stringent about it. Ema Sefa. So the end of the Mishnah is what? Stam Haramim. When we say that, like the Haramim, like that are like the objects in the Bet Hamikdash that actually belong to the Kohanim. Behuda Mutarin. If this if this person is actually lives in Yehuda, then it would be actually mutar to that person. Ubegalil asurin, and in the Galil, it would not. It would be asur. Why? She'en anshe agalil makirin et chamrei akohanim. Because up there in the Galil, they have no idea whatsoever what the haramim of the kohanim are. So ha makirim mutarin. So if they were familiar with the haramim of the kohanim, then it would be allowed to them. But because they have no idea what it is that they're talking about, then the neder is like doesn't take effect. Alma sfeka likula. And so here we see the opposite of what we saw before, is that like in this case, the sfeka has been decided like in a lenient way. So these are two that are opposite opposite things, contradictions. So let's see how it's going to get resolved. Amar Abaye, Sefer Rabbi Eleazar veRabbi Tzadok hi. So in the Mishnah, the whatever it is that we see in the end is the way that Rabbi Eleazar, the son of Rabbi Tzadok, is looking at it. Detanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Stam Truma Bihuda Asura. He said that like when you don't know, when you're referring to Truma in Yehuda, then it's like whatever object you have designated that you said this object is like Truma to me is actually asur to you. Rabbi Eleazar veRabbi Tzadok Omer, Stam Haramim begalil asurin. And if it's like something like if it's we're referring that to an object that is like Haramim and you live in the Galil, then this is going to be forbidden because you don't know what it is that that you're talking about. And that's it for today with Nedarim.
Yasher Koach, that was not an easy one.
No, this was not an easy one. The whole, I don't know. It's like, I felt that yesterday was like a little easier than today. It's like, I think that the fact that they contradict each other, and it's like you have to look at like who it is that is actually talking. It's like it makes it very difficult. You have to be really more knowledgeable than I am actually at this point of time about who said what and when and where they lived. And it's like, for example, one of the girsa is like changing Rabbi Eliezer. In the beginning we say Rabbi Eliezer, and then all of a sudden it becomes Rabbi Eleazar. So it's not the same guys, and it's like, and we know it's not the same guys because they didn't live at the same time, and it's not possible that they would have been arguing with Rabbi Meir and whatever. It's like, okay, so these are, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, and we have a rabbi who was about 300 years earlier than the rest of these rabbis. Rabbi Yosef ben Yoazer is one of the earliest of the Zugot.
Right. That happens, the confusion of Eleazar and Elazar. I remember that happening.
Another because it's like if it was Rabbi Eliezer, it would be Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenas. I think it's like that's when we say Rabbi Eliezer just like that.
Right. I don't know. Girsa, and like the corruption of the text, or copying of the text and stuff like that, I think. So,
Well, plus here you don't have Rashi, you have the Ran, who's
right,
like
right.
expensive in the way that he talks.
Yeah,
And
not as pure, yeah.
I-
This is a tough, yeah.
Yeah, I've done a lot of Yerushalmi learning, and it is so different not having Rashi, because in the Bavli, we just accept Rashi as the definitive definition of the text. And there's no Rashi in Yerushalmi, and it's not clear what the text says.
Right.
And you have different Acharonim. There's not much in the way of Rishonim on the Yerushalmi, but the Acharonim sometimes will they'll have completely different gear set.
Right. I think
yeah,
that's why Nedarim was not studied that much in yeshivas until Daf Yomi, but I don't think Nedarim was kind of studied that much,
so that would be the same with Shkalim then, right? Because
Right.
Shkalim is also like a Yerushalmi type of like,
Yerushalmi, yeah, with
yeah.
it's interesting, the commentaries on the Bavli, the commentaries at the page of the Bavli, Daf Yomi, Shekalim are different from the ones on the Yerushalmi. It's really kind of weird. And to show you how crazy it is for Yerushalmi, on the page of the Art Scroll Yerushalmi, Daf, there's a rabbi who lived in Chicago in the 20th century. That's how recently people have been writing important commentaries.
Yeah.
Maybe there just wasn't that much traditional commentary on it.
There is not a single person before the 16th century who wrote a commentary on that we have on an entire tractate of Yerushalmi.
Okay, Yishkoach, Miriam, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
Have a
like
good
this is
night.
like Yerushalmi without having Rashi.
What?
This is like a Yerushalmi when we don't have Rashi.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
All the
All
best.
right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.